Hello everyone and welcome back to our town. We are now in the 40s era. It's time of the World War II and lots of things will be changing afterwards and sort of improvements and stuff like that. So in 1940 the population of Britain was around 38.1 million, and by the end of the war in 1949 it was around 38.5 million, as there wasn't too much growth in population, as obviously a lot of people went off to war. There was lots of civilian casualties as well, so it all affected different things. Over this era there was a lot of cold winters and above average springs, but with cold summers as well, so the climate really took a little bit of a turn as well, and we'll find out a few in the fun facts section about how the weather actually affected some places. There was a lot of things introduced in this era as well, especially after the war. So things like social security, national health service became free, so everyone could access a doctor, and there was improved secondary school education as well. So a lot of people over this era weren't able to go to school regularly, and especially with the evacuation of children as well. So they thought it would be best to improve the education standards. There was a good success in our economy at this time, however, probably one of the only successes at this time, and it was a record of mobilizing the home front, so everyone who was at home, women and some of the men who couldn't fight, and GDP actually rose by 21% compared to in 1938, which was before the war. We also had a net flow of around £10 billion as well, and this was because of having to stand on our own and not rely on imports so much. So we became a lot more independent from our supplies, as we used to import near enough all of our food and our clothes and our manufacturing stuff from overseas. Obviously this then became under attack, as they thought, the Germans or the Nazis thought, that they could cut off the supply to Britain, and that's how they would finally capture it. Obviously this didn't happen. We sort of all banded together and started producing our own stuff. There was a big focus and a big effort on making aircrafts using steel, so any spare steel or steel that wasn't being used was used to make aircraft, and obviously that helped make our Royal Air Force one of the major factors in helping to win the war. And it started off with about 70% of our food was being imported, and by the end of the war the home agriculture actually increased by 35%, as this was because they had the campaign of growing your own and dig for victory and growing your own vegetables, so you didn't have to go and get the rationed book and get your rations versions of food. You could substitute what you couldn't get in the shops with the stuff that you grew at home, and 36% less people were eating meat as well, because this was more expensive and there was less of this about. More people were eating wheat and that was up by 81%. Potatoes were up by 96% as well. Obviously lots of chippy chips being fried and stuff, and lots of jacket potatoes. And by the end of the war there was 1.4 million allotments where people could grow their own fruit and vegetables as well. Obviously I mentioned that people were on rationing, so that everyone had a little book and they could only buy certain things at certain times and only certain amounts of that food as well. So you get like an ounce of butter, a few grams of flour and all sorts of stuff like that. Obviously the cheaper stuff and the stuff that was more easily imported, you would be able to have more of it, and the stuff that was a lot rarer, then you wouldn't be able to have as much of that. So because Britain was being under attack, there was a lot of deaths not only abroad but also at home as well. So around 51,509 people were killed during this time due to bombing, and that was happening in all near enough all major cities, and that's why 3.5 million children and teachers were actually evacuated from the big cities out into the country in a massive effort to protect the next generation. And buildings at this time and housing kind of was at a stagnant pace. That's why we've only got one house built this episode, this part of this series. So for this house they used a lot of green, a lot of sort of more cheaper materials. Everything was kind of like a mishmash of stuff they could either make or find. So we'll see upstairs with the interior, there's like a few different types of rugs, there's a lot of patterned wallpaper, there's only a few handful of pictures and stuff on the walls, there's a few bits of greenery in there now and again, and we've obviously got radios in each room so we can listen to what's happening in the war effort. We also, in this building, which is quite fun, is having green roof trim and green windows as well. I think that was probably due to the fact that it was cheaper to build, that they didn't have to paint over the top, or it could be covered in a special bit of paint. We've still got a bit of remnants from the Art Deco period, but it's definitely a more austere looking type of interior and build, and obviously it looks a little bit more Victorian-esque than it does the last two sort of periods. We're kind of coming out and kind of just having the necessary things, and also a lot of the stuff in the home, like tables and all sorts of stuff like that, were actually used to help people survive bombings and stuff, in turning their home into somewhere that could protect them as well. And obviously once we get to the end of this era, there will be new styles and new wonderful ideologies because of trying to not repeat the same things that has happened over the last years. So move on to our fun facts, and I tried to avoid a lot of facts about the war because I didn't want to make it too depressing. So I tried to pick out some stuff that was kind of fun and sort of somewhat serious as well. So in 1940, 2 million people were called up to service that were aged between 19 and 21. Obviously a lot more people was called to service as well as that, but that was the main age group, the fittest and the youngest to go and serve. This is also when food rationing came in and the River Thames actually froze over, and that was the first time since 1888, so you could tell how cold and how like different the climate has become over this sort of period. And in 1941, meal pies were introduced, and they were meat free and kind of a nice alternative for people that they could easily make at home, obviously meat being more expensive and stuff. Clothes also went on rationing, and the Red Cross also opened their first charity shop to help people who were poorer or had bombed out and lost all their possessions, so kind of also raise money as well to help other people in the war effort. In 1942, soap became rationed, which probably would have been lovely smelling everyone. In 1943, you weren't allowed to travel to the Isle of Wight, as Isle of Wight became one of the most like pinnacle points for us in the channel, and a lot of Navy base stuff would have been happening there, especially as they would be linked to Portsmouth, which is one of the biggest harbours here in the UK and still has lots of Navy stuff there. In 1944, the lift for banning married women to become teachers or working as teachers was lifted, as we were obviously needed more women in roles, and obviously they would replace the men teachers that had got off to fight in the wars. In 1945, it was when Animal Farm was first published by George Orwell, and the Piccadilly Tube Line station became the first to be lit with fluorescent light, and obviously we're still somewhat lighting our homes with phosphorescent light, even though we're going a bit more to LED lights, but I don't think they're as great. In 1946, the TV license was introduced, as more and more people obviously got televisions. At this time, the BBC didn't really broadcast a lot of stuff because of the war, but this was more 1946 was when the war ended, so we had the Victory Parade through London as well. We also had a family allowance for more poorer families that had been affected by the war, so they could have enough money to actually live and rebuild their lives and stuff like that. So that was a good introduction. In 1947, they nationalised the coal industry, and we'll be hearing a little bit more about that in the 70s when it all goes to pot. The birth rates increased. Obviously, nobody wanted to make any children during the war. Well, obviously some people did, keep warm, but the birth rate increased significantly afterwards. Obviously we had the safety and the security of not being at war, and this generation will be known as the baby boomer generation, and is causing a lot of problems at the moment for different reasons, healthcare and all sorts of stuff like that. They also upped the school leaving age to 15 to make sure everyone had a good education before they left, and the first ever permanent Oxfam charity shop was also on Oxford Street, so people could get all the stuff they needed and donate and raise money as well. In 1948, so we're past the war now, we're looking up, we're looking forward to the future. We have polo mints from Rowntree's, which is super nice, especially if you like mint. I don't personally. There's better polos out there, citrus polos. And in Austria, the Land Rover was also announced at the car show. There was mass production of washing machines as well, so getting more into technologies. And also the book I Spy was produced as well, so these were little books that you can still get, I think, and then you can like spy different things along your journey. In 1949, 1984 was published by George Orwell, again some lovely dystopian things, obviously inspired by the time at war. And the pound fell against the dollar by 30% as well, so a little bit of economic stuff. So we're coming nearly to the end of our little house build. You can see how different it kind of looks inside, and we're gonna have our own little allotment outside as well. We've got a little shed because we have a car, more and more people getting cars. We've got a washing line as well, and we've got it's a little bit more a basic house, but it'd be interesting to compare this time period with the 50s and see how we go from there. So I'm going to leave you with a tour through the house, and we can get up close and personal, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.